Okay, everyone, I thought it was very important to do a video for the disappearances of Julie Weflen, Deborah Swanson, and Katherine Gregory because in the discussion that I had with John Paulos, we did talk about some locations and directions and things, and I know that can sometimes be a little confusing when Unfound is just an audio show, and I know that probably by now, if you've been listening to Unfound for a long time, you know that I do videos once in a while when I think they could certainly help your understanding of a disappearance. Maybe I can think of most recently Christopher Sanders' disappearance, with that disappearance, and showing how he would have left that RV park and got out onto I-20 if you believe that happened. So we're going to go in order of the in the order that the disappearances were talked about in the episode. We're going to start with Julie, then we're going to go to Deborah, and then we are going to go to Katherine. So right now what you are looking at, and I've posted pictures both, as I said I would, on the Facebook page, in the Facebook group, the discussion group. I've also posted the pictures of the maps and locations on Twitter, and I've also posted them on Instagram. But with, of course, YouTube, you have an opportunity to do a little bit of talking, so I'm going to do that here. What you're looking at right now is, of course, the dark blue is what Google says is the quickest route from down here. Let me just use a pen as a pointer. Right down here is the substation where Julie was attacked, abducted, kidnapped, whatever word you want to use. The dark blue is what Google says is the shorter or more efficient route or route to this location up here, which is where Will Parks lived at the time. This is essentially the same place where he had his business, Adventure Dynamics. I think he lived on that property or lived right next to the property where he conducted his business. It's all right in that area. This would be an alternate route. Now, what's interesting is when I did this map for the pictures, Google said that this was in dark blue and this was in light blue. So dark blue means the most efficient route. The other day when I did it, it said this route going first west then north was the more efficient route. Whereas when I pulled this up to do this video today on Friday, May 22nd, 2020, it's now saying this is the route. So I think what we can determine from that is both routes are very similar. You can even see 9 minutes, 4.4 miles, 4.8 miles. Very, very close to the same distance and time. That's probably why Google did that. So that is the map. There is no denying that Will Parks lived close. And you also have to remember that this is 4.8 miles on a road. If you were to go this straight, I mean, it's really close. It would probably be only like 3 miles or maybe even less than that, as they say, the crow flies. But, and forgive me for my sniffles, allergies kicking in. So there's no denying that Will Parks lived close to the substation where Julie was abducted. Now, what does that mean? The truth is this. There are a lot of other people in this area who lived a lot closer to the substation than he did. But we just don't know if any of these people knew Julie or had a beef with her. But I just wanted to show you that Spokane is over in this direction. In fact, you can kind of see the outskirts of it right here on the bottom right-hand part of the picture. So if you want to believe that Will Parks did something to Julie, I guess it might make sense if he was coming this direction. But the point is, if he was going home, why didn't he just stop off there? He would have not even come close to where the substation was. In addition, if he's coming this direction, he would just go up here and go home. So he wouldn't get to the substation that way either. So I think what I'm saying is that the only way, if you believe that Will Parks came across Julie by accident, unplanned that day, he had to have been coming, and if I bump the camera, I apologize. But he had to have been coming not on, there we go, Four Mound Road, because once again, this is Four Mound Road. If he was coming from the west, coming down this way, he would have made a left up here to get to his house and going up that direction. Once again, let me zoom this out again. If he was coming from this direction, he would never get to the substation because he would make a left here to go home. If he was coming from Spokane, he would get over here and make a right, so he would never pass the substation. So the only thing that, unless he was going from Spokane and going out this direction some way, wasn't going home at all and happened upon her, or he was coming from this direction and was going to Spokane and happened upon her, I guess that could make sense. But I like the idea more that he was actually on Cooley Height Road that day for some reason, and he came down and saw her parked right there. If, once again, if you believe Will Parks is responsible for Julie's disappearance, I think that makes a lot of sense. Some of you may say, well, maybe he was stalking her, maybe he followed her from the power company. Well, being that she went out there, spur of the moment, I find that hard to believe. I mean, what was the plan? Was he going to follow her the whole way home and maybe risk, her husband being home? I don't particularly believe that. That's a real stretch. But I wanted to show you that just so you could kind of think this out in your mind of how he would have come across her at the intersection of Four Mound Road and Cooley Height Road that day. It's not quite as clear as you would think. It's not as obvious as you would think. Now, if I go down to Street View, and I think I can get rid of this. Yeah, there we go. Go down here and do a street view of this substation. Let me turn it around. There is the substation right down here. Now, this is a map from 2009. And we also have to remember there's a power. It very well could be that she might have been here. This is a substation as well. This could have been where she was. Either way, it doesn't make really any difference as far as directions go. But you see this big... You also have to remember this is from 2009, so things out here could have changed in the what would have been 22 years between her abduction and what's going on out here. I just don't know. But there is a power, some sort of power thing. I don't know. I'm not in the power business right here. But there is a much larger system of towers and wires and everything over here. And I'm unfortunately in my discussion with... Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. This is just a little hard to use. It wants to really jump. And you can tell... you can tell how remote this is. A street view on this area hasn't been done since 2009. You can kind of tell by the quality of the picture. It's a little fuzzy for 2020 terms. This is 11 years ago. So she might have been here. Once again, I think in the grand scheme of things, granted, to be precise, maybe we should know that. For purposes, though, of directions, I don't think it makes much of a difference. Here's the one fenced-in area down here, and then there's the larger fenced-in area down here. They're only separated by about not even 300 feet. But that is a street view of this area where Julie would have been that day. Of course, we know about the alleged eyewitness, a guy who says he was 13 years old at the time, who says that he saw Julie arguing with somebody and they were using names, so he thought it was some sort of husband and wife. What's confusing to me, this is a fairly wide open area, and how, if whoever the attacker was, would he have not seen these kids on bikes? I would think so. I just don't know. Something else that I would like to, but you can see how it's pretty wide open, and you can actually see buildings down here. In fact, let me go to the satellite view again. And once again, I do not know what the situation was in 1987, but you can see there's an elementary school almost right across the street. There is a church, I think, over here. Were they there back then? I don't know. You can see some buildings down here. I'm going to guess that some of these buildings were at least there in 1987. I just don't know how many. I don't know how well this area is being populated. Spokane, decently large city. City's really not that far away, although this is out kind of in the sticks. So you have to figure that all into your calculations about Will Parks and whether he could have been involved in Julie's disappearance. So let's now go to Deborah Swanson's, and I'm just going to scroll across here, go right over Spokane, and I'm going to take you to Coeur d'Alene, which is right over from Spokane right here. And this is not going to be quite as detailed. We just don't have as many details with Deborah's disappearance. We don't know where her car was parked. It would make sense that it was in the parking lot, which looks to be somewhere over here. This is Tubbs Hill Trail. You can see it right here, Tubbs Hill Trail. And allegedly, she went running in this park and disappeared. Her car was found later when she didn't come home, when people couldn't reach her. You can see a parking lot right there. But once again, this is a relatively new picture. This is from when? It says 2020. Maybe it is that new. Very possible. And once again, I'm doing this on May 22nd, 2020, actually the day that this episode comes out. You know, my concern about her disappearance is that this park is right on the edge of this, what I would call a large body of water. Let's see if I can find the name of it. What is it called? I had it written down and now I'm kind of forgetting. It's called, yeah, there it is down there. Harrison Slough. How do you say that? I've never seen that word before. Slough. I know somebody's going to correct my spelling or pronunciation on that. But that is the park right there. And right up here is where the parking lot is. I'm going to guess that is where her car was eventually found. And so the question you have to ask is, it's not a park where there's, you know, it's not a park that's completely surrounded by a city. There's only a few places you can go. I'm going to guess that this park being surrounded, at least bordered by a body of water on 3/4 of it about, could lend itself to the idea that maybe Deborah went in there and committed suicide. Of course, her remains were never found. But on the other hand, they did search this park back then. It's been since 1986, so it's been 34 years. No remains have been found in the park. So if she didn't commit suicide, that would probably mean that somebody abducted her and did take her out. How did that person do that without being seen? Where would that person have parked his vehicle? Once again, if it was Will Parks or anybody else. I've never been there, so I can't say, and that's kind of why I asked John if he had ever been there, to kind of go check that out and what would have been the situation in 1986. Of course, understanding that Although I'm sure this park is very similar to the way it was in 1986, we don't know about everything else. There's a marina here. This looks like a place for boats over here. Were they there at the time? Was the parking lot there? Was it somewhere else? Was it smaller? We just don't know. And, there's a dog park here, which my perception is that dog parks are a relatively new part of American culture, maybe within the last 20, 25 years or something. So, excuse me. It might not have been there. So that adds in a lot of, what do you want to call it, variables in trying to analyze this. But that's the park. I'm taking for granted that Deborah parked right here. She went in here, and that's where she disappeared. So that is Deborah Swanson. Now let's go back to Spokane to look at Katherine Gregory. Once again, just give me a moment so I can line this all up. And I'm going to have to type in an address here. And this will be the address. It's 1810 North Addison Street, Spokane. There we go. All right, so why is that location important? That is where Will Parks was living in 1981 when Katherine Gregory disappeared. Katherine Ray Gregory, she'd just gotten married recently. Right there. And so you can see that red dot. And where did she disappear from? Do the directions. Right about right here. Right about right there. It's close. So, at the time, if you want to believe that Will Parks had something to do with these disappearances, he lived approximately 4 miles from where Julie Weflen was abducted. And here he lived approximately 2 miles from where Katherine Gregory was abducted. Of course, we have to remember, there's a lot of other people who lived much closer to that area as well. And 2 miles in a city is pretty far, whereas 2 miles in the country is not that far. No stoplights, no stop signs, probably no intersections. You can drive 2 miles in the country very fast, whereas in town, as I know, living here in the Tampa area, 2 miles, could take a little while. Now, it should be known that her car was found south of here, and at the time I checked that she actually lived south down here. So it's not like she lived near where Will was living at the time. She lived down in this area somewhere, and her car was found in that area. So there's certainly some circumstantial evidence that needs to be perused, that needs to be analyzed. I think when it comes to Katherine Gregory, I think what I'm saying here is that with Julie and Deborah, I think that there's circumstantial evidence that Will knew them, but I think that that's something that certainly has to be investigated more. The flaw, I would say right now, the weak part of believing that Will Parks had anything to do with Katherine's, I realized that John gave his reasoning in the interview, but unless somebody can establish that Katherine and Will knew each other, that's a hard sell, I think. We also have to remember this is downtown Spokane. It was broad daylight when she disappeared. It wasn't like she was walking in an alley at 3 a.m, as is the case with Julie and Deborah. They also seemingly disappeared during the day while the sun was out. So, but Julie's out in the middle of nowhere. Deborah's in the middle of a park, maybe by herself. Okay, maybe we can see that. But Katherine, downtown, was going to work or coming out of a class. There would have been several other people. I guess if she knew Will and maybe he just happened to stop by, maybe he was stalking her, asked her, hey, get in the car. I could see that, but she surely wouldn't get in the car with somebody she didn't know. So those are the maps and some explanations for the locations that we talked about during the episode, The Disappearance of Julie Weflen, Deborah Swanson, and Katherine Gregory, an episode that is called The Women's Reject. Thanks for watching.